and welcome to the Green Room. I'm Bengi Ünsal, Head of Contemporary Music at Southbank Center. I would like to welcome Rufus.
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hi.
Welcome, Rufus. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
You're joining from LA, so I would like to actually say good morning.
Yes. No, we get up. We have both an 11-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a small dog. So we've been up for hours.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I've adopted one during COVID as well. 7 a.m. usually is my wake up time now.
Yeah.
So I want to actually go back to December 2019 at the beginning of this talk, because in December, you had a not so silent night at Royal Festival Hall with a stellar lineup, if I might say, with Martha and you and guests like Chrissy Hine, Neil Tennant, Guy Garvey, Ed Harkett, Sophia Ellis-Bextor, to name a few. It was an amazing night. Does it seem like a lifetime away to you right now?
You know, it's funny because we had a little just for the audience, we had a little, a debriefing or forebriefing, however you would put it, before this event, and you mentioned the Christmas at the Southbank, and it took me about a few seconds to remember. I was like, oh yeah, that happened. So and it was a lovely memory that returned thanks to you, and yeah, it was a great experience, but definitely feels like it's part of a whole other universe that we'll hopefully we'll visit again at some point. But it was an amazing experience, and so much so that even if COVID had not happened, it does seem rather legendary and mythical and mystical and not of this planet. So yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah, we were so glad to have you there. At World Festival Hall. We feel you're part of our family, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yeah, well, it was a very important night, especially for Martha and I, because I think the last time we'd done a show there was, of course, around a tribute to my mother, Kate McGarrigle, for the meltdown. So it was, it definitely, and that show, the Christmas show, was around the 10th anniversary of her passing. So it was very, it was a very moving experience, and also a positive one. We're all still here.
Yeah. And right after that hit the pandemic.
Yeah.
So you're probably one of the few musicians who constantly, I would say, produced and performed during this time. Yeah. I lost count of it. How many concerts was it in the end? You've been quite busy.
I was definitely doing one a week. And in fact, we've announced a big one today, which is sort of like the grand finale of the quote unquote live streams. This won't actually be a live stream per se, but we're doing the Judy Garland album at Capitol Studios. So, and that's with our special guest Renee Zellweger, who is my captive, and who I'll be singing to. Anyways, and Kristen Chenoweth too, who's an amazing Broadway star. And anyways, so I worked a lot. I don't, I hate to be this person who tends to chide his fellow artists, but I thought it was a really big opportunity, for as a creative person, to have this time, to have this focus, and of course, I had the opportunity. I'm not homeless. I wasn't sick, so I therefore even more, felt the need to work and to really indulge in all the possibilities that I could during this very unique time, because I was working so much before as well, and so it was just, I had to keep the engine running, I guess. For sure.
So will the Judy Garland show be streamed as well?
Yes, it will be streamed. Yes, it's going to be streamed on June 10th, which is actually Judy Garland's 99th birthday. So
wow.
So there we go.
I actually missed it the first time you did that. So it will be a good chance for me to actually catch up and see it. I was so curious about that show. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, definitely. What did you, the live streams also, I was wondering, what do you think about it overall, this digital world? What did you learn from it? Was it a good opportunity to meet with your fans?
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel, you know, I have been accused in the past of being Pollyanna-ish on many occasions, and I probably will again in this concept where, you know, I very much benefited, especially in terms of the fact that I really didn't have like an online persona before COVID, and it was always something that was missing, and that was kind of actually demanded of me by, you know, my record labels and management, so forth, like this, that you really have to, you know, have more of a presence on Instagram and all of that. And I always thought it was annoying and pointless and kind of, you know, flimsy. But then when COVID came around, I was forced to embrace this, you know, new world. And now I have, you know, a real tool in terms of just, you know, surviving the music business in general, pandemic or not, because that's kind of where everything is going nonetheless. And, you know, I definitely have a much more, how can I say, much more holistic view of online activities in terms of the arts. And I still feel it doesn't, you know, compare to the live experience, and that, you know, we all have to really work our hardest to return to some kind of, you know, exchange in person, and in the same room. But that being said, I was a lot of my prejudices were erased about the internet and communicating in that way, because I really had to rely on it, as everybody else did.
Yeah, we did have to do, and willingly and happily, quite a lot of digital concerts here at Southbank, and also talks as well, and it went really good. It just gives us,
and I think it's something that will continue. I think it's something, you know, I just did a show in Manhattan at the City Winery, did 2 nights there, and we had, you know, a live stream as well, and there were people in the room, and there were people who could see the concert, you know, around the world, and that's a really amazing kind of new dimension, I think, that we now do comfortably.
Your new album was about to come out, right? It was about to be released when COVID hit, and if I'm not mistaken, you had a single probably out from the album.
And then we pushed back the release.
You pushed back, and then the album was released in the summer, and it was your first pop album, may I say, pop album in the past 8 years, which we were looking forward to. By the way, I love everything that happened in between, which will come to that. But and you will be touring it this autumn, hopefully, right? Fingers crossed.
Yes. Fingers crossed. I mean, I'm going to try to do a few shows in the summer in Europe. We'll see. I may or may not play the UK, but that's, everything's still so up in the air with all that. But yes, in the fall, I will be, you know, doing my pop, you know, pop lap, and around parts of the world. And I mean, it certainly won't be as triumphant as I imagined at first, just because you know, everything is more muted at the moment. But I think that it's I think in a lot of ways it's more, this album now, because it came out at such a dramatic time, and that people listen to it with these, you know, very kind of damaged, you know, ears in the sense from what was happening. I think people will really be happy to see the show, and I'm very excited to get out there and do it.
When did you write the album? Like, it's very personal. I feel there are a lot of there are quite a lot of songs about your husband and your daughter.
Yeah. I mean, Unfollow the Rules, the Grammy nominated
The
Unfollow
Grammy
the
nominated.
Rules, it's actually was written over a good 10-year period, because I did Out of the Game, and then I was somewhat, how can I say this, somewhat misguided in my beliefs on that album. I adore that record, and I worked with the great Mark Ronson, and in that process I kind of believed that I would be the next, Amy Winehouse or something. Like, I just got trapped in that fantasy, which he is able to imbue with his glamorous a sense, a personality. Anyway, so I went out, didn't become a huge, massive, pop star, which in retrospect, I mean, the record was called Out of the Game. And so come on, I mean, what do you expect? Anyway, so then I did that, and then I got a chance to like go back to the opera world, and I did some more work with Prima Donna, and then I wrote Hadrian, and I also did the Shakespeare sonnets record, and all during that kind of period, what was wonderful is that I was then able to return to songwriting as a kind of, how can I say this, as a kind of weapon to protect myself from, the jungles that I was exploring. I mean, working in an arts institution, how intense, the opera world can be, the classical world especially, and I adore it, and I intend to return. But it was this. But I did find myself needing to like retreat occasionally and just write a song for my own pleasure. So a lot of the songs came from that, really sincere place of writing for me, as opposed to writing for, radio or what I think should be popular. So I think it's a very personal album in that way. And also, as I said, it was like a good 8 or 10 years in between. So I also got to like really sift through the material and pick the best pieces, and also see which pieces stayed in the ear, over the years. So yeah, it was a good process.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you about the operas that you've written, but one thing that you just said about songwriting makes me wonder, with the digital world that we were just talking about, and with the enhancements and streaming, which I know you're also vocal about the rights, etc. The songwriting, I feel, has been changing a lot because people scan when they're listening to songs on digital platforms, etc. How do you feel about that? There's also this other side of the industry, I feel, also is songwriters are becoming more and more important at the moment.
I mean, that would be wonderful if that is the case. But I mean, at least from my perspective, and I live in Hollywood, big bad LA, and as I said, I am a Grammy nominated artist. I didn't win the last one. I lost to James Taylor, which is, I suppose that's not too bad. But I did watch a lot of I did get kind of wrapped up in the rigmarole of it, and watch the show, and really kind of inspected what was happening. And I have to say, I wasn't. Look, I don't want to sound like an old fart, but I think songwriting is, let's just say that I definitely feel like I'm here to fight for songwriting, and especially in terms of lyrics. I think lyrics are the soul of songwriting, and I don't claim to be the world's best lyricist, but I do work very hard on them, and the lyricists that I admire are eternal, and so I am hoping to just be part of the movement of bringing back songwriting, and to where it really is about the song, believe it or not, and so, because I do think, I don't know how different things are now, but if you look back in the history of, especially in the United States, of songwriting, I mean, it's just such a glorious tale, and there have been so many high points to sort of gauge. And so it'd be nice to have another period like that. And certainly after a pandemic, it's warranted.
Yeah, I do hope as well. And I have a feeling it is coming.
Yeah.
I mean, there's of course that pop, really, really pop TikTok kind of songs, but then there's again the albums, the songs that I hope will get more of a recognition that they deserve in the coming decade, hopefully. So the operas, we were actually, when I met you face to face, I think it was 2019.
Yeah.
We were thinking of and talking about, I don't know if I may say, bringing your operas to Royal Festival Hall and Southbank Centre, which we were very, very excited about.
Yes.
And I hope that we can do that.
Yes.
How I'm wondering how your relationship with the genre began. Like, did you ever think of studying it? Or
well, I went to a conservatory, McGill in Montreal for about a year and a half. I failed, I think, every course. I arrived and was ready to kind of unleash my creative blood and really have this, wild existence, but was very quickly it was very quickly announced that it was more like engineering school in terms of going to a classical conservatory, and you had to practice all this time. And I wrote music the whole time, but I don't know, I just was not ready to be so academic about music. So I eventually dropped out. But opera remained my main passion, and I would continue to go, and eventually I felt the need to give back to that form of music that had helped me so much through all the dramatic parts of my life, like coming out of the closet very young, when AIDS was so prevalent, also my mother's death and dealing with addiction. I mean, opera was always there to kind of, that was where I went for solace and for understanding. Anyways, and then I wanted to write one eventually, and I did. And it's interesting because I think having exited the sort of the establishment by dropping out of music school, there was, even though like technically there were some issues that I had to contend with and I needed help in certain areas, I also ended up sounding very unique. I wasn't sort of churned out from this system of composition that I feel is a little bit, dull. So I don't know. I was able to sort of lean into opera in a much more kind of I don't know, a genuine way, as opposed to thinking of it as this, kind of Western, high art. It really was about, my passion for it. So that I hope to put into my operatic work, which a lot of singers and people in the opera world react to very well, because they, at times it can be a little cold, that arena. So I feel I'm needed.
Most definitely. We were just also talking about like lyrics, which made me think about the Shakespeare sonnet albums that because from a point of view, poetry is actually, or songs, lyrics are poetry, and poetry can be lyrics as well in return. And you've demonstrated that. How did that idea come about? Did it have anything to do with the Robert Wilson?
Yeah, that was a very organic process, because it actually began years before Robert Wilson. It began with this friend of mine who sadly passed away, named Michael Kamen, who was a very famous film composer. He did the music to Brazil and Mr. Holland's Opus, and he was a very well-known musical figure in London, actually, American. But he was doing a benefit album for Rada, and this is God about 20 years ago, and he asked me to compose music to one of the sonnets, and I did, and then so that was released, and it was just the song always sort of made an impression on people, and I can't remember what number it was. It was "When in Disgrace with Fortune in Men's Eyes," that sonnet, and and people always kind of referred to it and went back to it, and then over the years it just seemed to last, and then finally Robert Wilson was asked to do a version of some of the sonnets with the Berlin Ensemble in Germany, and I was approached, and I was like, look, I mean, Robert Wilson, Berlin Ensemble, the Shakespeare sonnets. Okay, I have no choice but to do this, and I was right in choosing that, and I ended up writing a lot more music. And then a few years later, we never really recorded the sonnets. It was filmed once, but I never made a good recording. And then a few years later, it was the I guess the 450th anniversary of Shakespeare's death, or something like, or 400th, something like that, and they were doing a big celebration in Stratford, and I was asked to be part of that concert, and it just made sense. Like, let's join in this festivity, celebrating his death, which always seemed a bit odd to me. And so then I made the album with help from friends as well, and so forth.
Very beautiful album. Like, I was listening to it yesterday, and then the late Carrie Fisher is reading the song. It's like,
yeah.
And then I think Florence Welch is singing it.
Yeah, she is. And then also Anna Prohaska, who's this fantastic German opera singer. She's in it, on it as well. No, I think it's one of the dark horses of my repertoire. It's not a lot of people know about that record, but those who kind of discover it are very very, very, very happy. And there's a lot of that in my career, a lot of little musical sinkholes.
No, like, yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed. I've been following, of course, your career so
Yes.
from quite a long time ago, and the first concert of yours actually that I watched, unfortunately a little bit late because I was in Istanbul, but it was in this amazing church. I might have told you this.
Yes, I remember that show so well. And then there was the cat.
The cat.
Yes. At the end of the show, this little white cat appeared on stage while I was singing, I think Hallelujah or something.
Yeah.
And the cat was on the altar, and he or she or it, whatever, took over the concert, and it was a memorable
Yeah,
evening.
I think you had to stop at one point.
Yeah.
And then just like acknowledge the moment. It was amazing. Yeah.
And it was a white cat, which is nice. If it had been a black cat, it was a white cat.
What's next? I mean, you told us about the Judy Garland show, and I know that you've released this with Audible. You did an original production, and you did Road Trip to Elegies, which is, I think it's a very interesting idea. Would you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, Road Trip Elegies. It's available on Audible. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if it's available yet in Europe and the UK. I don't know. I know it is in America and Canada.
I think it will be available soon.
Okay. Yeah, but it's I have this great therapist that I work with, Mark Stafford, and he who's English actually, and he we would just always have these incredible conversations, and often I would leave thinking, God, I wish I could have recorded some of that. And then Audible approached me about doing something, around a show, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be interesting to like do a long conversation and then find musical kind of a musical counterpoint to it, and so in order to set up this relationship, I thought, well, why don't I take a drive with Mark, so that'll give us a long time together, and instead of sitting in a room, and we drove from Montreal to New York, and I spoke to him, and this is a journey that I've taken many times, that my mother took when she was young, and that my father took, coming to visit us, and so it was just, it's the Hudson River Valley is teeming with memories and energy for me. So I did that drive, and then later I did 3 nights, and this is literally right before the pandemic. The shows, we did 3 shows at McCabe's in LA of songs that kind of related to the drive, and literally like a week later the world was shut down, so we just got that in time. And anyways, and then we ended up, you know, mushing it up all together, and it's in 3 hours. There's 3 sections, and it's definitely, you know, it's a nice way to spend an afternoon for sure.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I just wanted to ask one last question. The pandemic has been, I would say, probably the hardest on the young musicians and artists coming in. Do you have any advice for them?
Well, you know, the advice that I give to any young musician or artist in general is that usually, not always, but usually it takes 10 years to get where you want to go. You know, it took me 10 years. I started when I was very young. I started when I was 13. So I had that leg up. So by the time I was 23, I had, you know, some time under my belt. But so regardless of whatever is happening in the world, it's going to take you 10 years. So just keep that in mind. And if it doesn't happen after 10 years, then stop. Because, you know, life is just too short. And but yes, I think, look, it's arguably with what's occurred with this, you know, opening up online of people, you know, communicating through the internet and really, you know, sharing their artistic talents this way. There's probably a lot more opportunity now than there was before COVID. So let's, you know, let's ride this baby in, as they say.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you.
welcoming us to your house.
Thank you.
And coming to our green room. And I'm looking forward to seeing you over the summer then.
That's great. We'll definitely, it's a deal. It's a deal.
Thank you very much. And please watch out for the other green room conversations. And we will see you next time.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Rufus.